Welcome to Washington in Focus Daily. It is Monday, June 1st, 2026. I'm Carlene Johnson, the Center Square's state government reporter. And in today's episode, the names of all the victims from last week's disaster in Longview with that paper mill situation, not an explosion or an implosion. Now, I'm told a catastrophic failure from that corrosive chemical tank, but we have the names of all 11 victims. Still others remain hospitalized. 2 weeks from the World Cup games starting in Seattle. Hard to believe after all this time, it's already here. And we want to know now, is the city ready? What about security? What about the homeless, drug addiction, graffiti issues, all of that? Well, Downtown Seattle Association President and CEO John Scholes had a conversation with him last Friday. So he has some interesting perspective. One of them is he wants the cameras back on in the stadium district. And then the state is hoping to lure people back to the WA Cares program. You may recall a few years ago when this rolled out, requiring everyone to contribute 58 cents of every $100 that you make for a long-term care insurance program for you in the future should you need it. Lots of people opted out. Well, the state now says, have we got a deal for you? We want you to drop your private plan and have an opportunity to re-enroll in the Washington Cares program. So let's dive in. It was just before 7:15 in the morning last Tuesday, 6 days ago, that a tank filled with 900 gallons of something called white liqueur that is used in the paper making process to kind of break down pulp. Some sort of catastrophic failure. All last week, we were calling it an implosion, as was everybody else. But now we've learned that it was most likely some kind of catastrophic or structural failure. I spoke briefly this morning with a couple of lawmakers, Representative Jim Walsh and Senator Jeff Wilson. That's his district in Longview. He's quite familiar with the plant itself, that Nippon facility. And he said, yeah, I don't think we can call it an implosion anymore. This is looking more like some sort of catastrophic structural failure. But we had 11 workers killed and 7 more at that facility that suffered burns and inhalation injuries, including a firefighter. There are still 3 people hospitalized, but we now have the names of those who lost their lives. And you can see that their ages range from some in their 20s to those in their upper 50s. So much life lost. And we again, still really don't know what happened, only that this is, in fact, Washington State's deadliest industrial disaster since 1930. And that was when 17 workers died in a blast in Carbonado at a mine that was owned by the Pacific Coast Coal Company. So many lives lost. That community still reeling from this. And Labor and Industries is looking into any past safety violations. We've heard some instances where they were investigating a couple things, nothing related to this tank that failed. No other safety issues specifically related to that, although we have heard from a law firm in Seattle that is representing at least one of the victims' families, a woman who says that her husband, who was killed, had raised some safety concerns and that had not been addressed. So, of course, there's going to be a lot more coming on that. But meantime, we've got ecology, the State Department of Ecology, and local water managers that have been monitoring releases since that disaster 6 days ago. Main concerns, of course, about the drinking water and the discharges. Did they get so far as to the Columbia River? Because that ditch drainage system in Longview, just adjacent even where the mill is located, uh, some of that runoff did certainly reach that drainage system. But I'm told by Ecology and their most recent release that went out on Sunday that the pH levels at this point are pretty normal. They're doing a lot of flushing of the drainage system and checking pH levels constantly. And the drinking water, they say there are no issues at this point, but we do have some dead fish. So I did have a conversation this morning. I'm going to share just a brief clip from Steve Hobner. He's the stormwater manager for the city of Longview. Um, he said because asked him specifically, I said, how do you prepare for something like this? Stormwater, you have a giant storm and there's runoff and you've got your drainage system can't keep up and that sort of a thing. But how do you prepare for something like this? And he said, basically, this is not something we had ever anticipated.
This is a pretty large scale catastrophic failure that I think most communities would not anticipate. We do have a, wellhead protection program in the city. We do, obviously, I'm the stormwater manager for the city. We do anticipate small scale spills, but nothing of this magnitude.
Now, as of today, we have about 2,000 dead fish that have been collected from the ditch systems in locations that are adjacent right to the incident response area and in West Longview. They've collected carp, they've collected catfish, sunfish, bass, and a single, they say, hatchery raised coho salmon. That's been a big concern. But again, the pH levels in the Columbia River are as they were before. They don't believe any of this toxic chemical actually has reached the river, although the flushing process will continue. They expect to collect a lot more dead fish in the days ahead. And they've said that anybody who sees a dead fish or other wildlife impacts that they believe to be connected to this chemical disaster, they don't want you to collect it and then tell them about it. What they want you to do is, if you see it, to take a photograph, obviously note the exact location as much as you can, and then call the Fish and Wildlife number, which is 1-800-22-BIRDS. So 1-800-22-BIRDS, BIRDS. They don't want anyone touching any of this, of course. Those animals were exposed to these noxious chemicals. All right. Secondly, Seattle officially preparing to host the 2026 FIFA World Cup just a couple of weeks away. City leaders, emergency officials asserting that all their years of preparation have paid off, and we are ready to accommodate an estimated 750,000 visitors to the city of Seattle for the various World Cup games that are going to be hosted in the city. Now, some lawmakers remain concerned about safety issues. The city is implementing some major logistical and transit initiatives to manage the influx. Here's the tournament schedule. I want to put this up for you. You can see obviously the most exciting event for us in Seattle is going to be the match held at Lumen Field on June 19th, when the men's team, the USA men's team, will play Australia. So I looked up prices for that game if you're still looking for tickets and you just, got some money to spare. The cheap seats that were still available when I got on this morning and checked are about $1,100-$1,200 each. Better seats are going close to $6,000, but there are still tickets remaining. So if you're a diehard soccer fan and just got to be there for that main game on June the 19th, you can still go. There are still tickets available. You might not be able to pay your mortgage for the next few months, but you could go. I spoke, as I mentioned, with John Scholes, President and CEO of the Downtown Seattle Association, to see what their members are saying about the World Cup. Will it be a boon for the economy? The one that everybody hoped for. He's actually pretty optimistic that even though not as many people have booked hotel rooms that they were hoping for, he says the city will really benefit.
This is a big events town. It's been that way certainly since the World's Fair in 1962, but recently as well. We had a terrific victory parade for the Seahawks. We hosted the Winter Classic for the NHL at T-Mobile not too long ago. We had All-Star Week. This is a town that's used to big events and big crowds in the summer, and I think is going to shine and deliver a fan experience for locals and visitors unlike any other of the 16 or 15 other host cities across the three continents, because it's so walkable, because our stadium's so close to the downtown. We've got this incredible waterfront. We've got great transit service, so people don't all have to drive to Lumen Field. So we're thrilled and excited about what's coming in just 2 weeks or so. The first match on the 15th of June, and the residual return, I think, is a great opportunity for Seattle, with folks coming here maybe for the first time, having a great time, going back, telling their friends and family and colleagues, and hopefully they and many others return. And so I think the residual value of being able to host these matches is potentially significant. And the good news is we haven't had to build a new stadium and spend hundreds of millions of dollars in infrastructure that's not going to be used or needed after these matches are done. Certainly, there's been some investments made, but most of the things that have been invested in are things we're going to benefit from and utilize for years to come. And they weren't necessarily built for soccer; they were built because they're important things for our city and region.
So Scholes is pushing for Mayor Katie Wilson to turn the cameras back on all over the city. This is something we've talked about. She she ran on one of her campaign promises before she took office this year was going to be, I don't like the security cameras. I don't want federal officials getting a hold of that. I don't want it used in ICE, immigration enforcement. I don't want them tracking people. And she wanted all the cameras off. Well, that really backfired, especially when it came to how the Seattle Police Department responded. And to her credit, she's turned some of those cameras back on. But Scholes with the Downtown Seattle Association says the cameras that are down in the stadium district are still off. They're there, they're up. They just need somebody to push the on button. And he thinks with the World Cup coming, that should certainly be happening.
Cameras are clearly helping us solve crimes that otherwise wouldn't be solved, and helping us apprehend suspects who have committed serious crimes that potentially wouldn't have been apprehended otherwise. I've never heard a juror, a victim of crime, or a prosecutor say, hey, we wish we had less evidence. And these cameras provide clear evidence, and they're helping our officers. And as we rebuild the police force and hire more officers, and we've been down several hundred over these last couple of years from where we were in 2019, having this tool and technology is helpful. So I say more cameras. I'm glad the mayor has evolved her position and I think recognized the value of this system and has been listening and talking to a lot of people, and kept the ones we do have in place, which was, I think, somewhat potentially contrary to the position and some of what she said on the chemtrail. So I commend her for listening, evolving her position, taking on new information. I do think the ones by the stadium that have been installed, we should turn them on. There's, I think, very little risk that the federal government takes over this pretty limited camera system, and the benefits far outweigh that limited risk. And we should remind ourselves we have lots of cameras that if the federal government really wanted to take them over, whether it's our traffic cameras or Port of Seattle or the Pike Place Market, or we've got cameras at City Hall. There's plenty of camera systems. The federal government wants to take them over. And
one other note from Scholes at the Downtown Seattle Association, he said, I wish that the city had done a better job in cleaning up the graffiti. Maybe you haven't been downtown recently. If you have, it's all along the I-5 corridor. It's in the 99 corridor, the tunnels. It's even across the bridges, down on the waterfront. It's embarrassing. You've got all these people coming to check out Seattle, many of them likely for the first time, maybe people coming from overseas, where you don't find graffiti anywhere. So it's a blight on the city, and he wishes that the mayor had, done something more about that, and that DOT had done more about, cleaning that all up. But it hasn't happened. So a little late for that to happen now because we've got the World Cup in just 2 weeks. Now to the tax you've had deducted from your paycheck since 2023, and maybe you didn't pay attention. If you have auto deposit like many of us do, maybe only check your pay stub when you're, concerned about what your vacation balance is or just how much you're paying in taxes. Well, since 2023, Washington workers have paid 58 cents on every $100 earned in the state of Washington for the WA Cares Fund, the Washington Cares Fund. And this is to put into a fund if and when you need long-term care insurance. So something happens to you, need some assisted living facility, maybe memory care assistance, and you're placed in a facility and need care. This will pay for a lifetime benefit of $36,500 for you out of your contributions. Well, you may recall that at the time there was a carve out made for people. And up until a certain date before the tax was collected in 2023, if you showed that you had private long term care insurance, you could opt out so that you don't have that tax deducted from your paycheck. But you did have to show I've got my own private long term care plan. It's going to be better than what the state's offering. And I don't want your program. And so you had to fill out this attestation, basically say, I've got my own program. I don't need it. I don't need the state's program. Well, at the time, it created this barrage of people that wanted to get a private plan. They said, forget the state plan. That's not going to be a big enough benefit if I ever need to, dip into it anyway. I want a private plan. Well, it completely flooded the long-term care insurance market here in the state, such that pretty much everybody shut down and stopped accepting any new applications. So if you already had a plan, you could opt out. You couldn't really get a new private plan. There just wasn't time to do it. And most of us ended up, having to opt in. We didn't really want to opt in, many of us, but you had no choice but to pay into the WA CARES program. Well, now here's the update. Since the beginning of this year, the state of Washington, through Employment Security, has been sending out letters to folks who opted out and said, hey, there's a limited opportunity. Here you go. We've got the deal of the century for you. You can opt back into the program. The state claims they received more than 6,500 inquiries from people wanting to cancel their exemption, their opt out, saying, okay, maybe my private plan that I had got too expensive, or maybe I bought into it only to avoid this state plan, but now I want to cancel that one and opt into the state plan. Claims they've gotten 6,500 people. And so they're opening up a new enrollment period for the folks that self-exempted. Now, curious about the friendly reminders. Yeah, and what this really all means. Does the state have maybe some other motivation for doing this? Well, Washington Policy Center's Elizabeth New, who heads up WPC's Center for Healthcare and Worker Rights, is raising some concerns about this. She wants to know what's really going on here with the state. Why are they sending these letters out? Do we really have thousands of people who say, hey, state, I don't like my private plan. I want to get in on the state plan and I want you to start deducting from my salary? So she's asking some questions about this, and she's concerned that potentially it could mean the state is soon going to require currently exempted workers to reattest that they still have private long-term care insurance.
I don't think they're confused by them. I think they're skeptical of them. At one point, way back in I think 2021, you could take advantage of the opportunity to buy your own private long-term care insurance plan. And really the way out was meant for people that already had long-term care insurance. But the law was written in such a way that if people obtained it by a certain date in 2021 that I can't remember, they could be exempted from WellCare's program and the payroll tax. So nearly 500,000 people did, about 500,000, I think 476,000 to be exact, somewhere in there. So now the letters that are going out tell people that the state has heard from several thousand people, and they say, hey, because you've improved the eligibility, is there a way to get back into the program? I don't know if that's true or false, but that's what's being sent out, and I'm sure it's true. I don't know. I just don't know anyone who wants back in, but they could, especially people if you know you're going to be needing long-term care in the 4 or 5 year range, you might want back in to have extra money going toward that. In any case, these letters have gone out. They asked people, hey, come back. Here's how you do it. We know people want back in. There's a way to do that. Governor Ferguson passed a law last session that said people could.
So New at WPC is kind of viewing these letters that went out with some skepticism, wants to know what's really going on here. And she's also concerned that once the state starts paying out WA-term cares policies, what's going to be the feedback? Well, you have people that say, hey, this money lasted a year for my grandma because $36,500 doesn't go very far in the state of Washington or probably other states as well. But if you have a loved one, in a long-term care facility or a memory care facility or other specialized, um, care, $36,500 is gone in a blink. It's certainly not going to last very long. So she's wondering what the fallout will be. And she says that people, have the right to be asking these questions now, especially with the state sending these letters out.
I don't know what to make of it. There's the suspicious part of me that says they're giving people a way in before they demand that they reprove or that they prove to begin with that they have private long-term care. The window for this was open, it was an attestation. So who knows if everyone who attested that they had it. I know people have dropped some of them since then. The long-term care industry tells me that many people canceled their plans after they became exempt from law cares. So, the suspicious person in me thinks they're going to make you reprove attestation, and this is a warning shot to say, get back in before it's too late.
So the opt back in window is a wide open window. Started at the beginning of this year, and it won't close until the end of June 2028. So another 2+ years out. So there's time for people to consider. Maybe they do have a private long-term care plan, and they're thinking it's too expensive or isn't going to meet their needs for whatever reason. You'll have that opportunity to opt into the WA Cares program, which you can already do if you live outside the state of Washington. But work here, you don't have to take part of the program, or service members and their spouses have that opt out privilege as well, and veterans as well. Um, so lots to consider there, but I would encourage you to check out Elizabeth News' piece. She ran an op-ed that we covered on the Center Square Washington's page. So I encourage you to check that article out. So that is it for today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily for the 1st of June, 2026. Monday's in the books. And we hope to see you again tomorrow. As always, check out our Center Square Washington page for more articles like this. And we hope to see you back here again on Tuesday.